used to board our horses at a farm down the road from where we live now, and their house was kind of set back in fields with crop fields all around them, and then some pasture for the horses as well. And to get to their house and to the barn and the pastures, there were two long field driveways. And the driveway that we used to usually take from the west was kind of raised up, and to allow water to drain from the north field to the south field, they'd stuck a culvert about midway down that driveway. And my son and I were out riding, heading out, I guess, maybe to some ponds or to some woods that we used to like to ride in quite a bit. And they had a couple farm dogs, and the farm dogs would always go along with us and explore and things. We thought that was kind of good to expose the horses to that, and to the dogs darting around and everything, and then they got used to it pretty quickly. But on this particular day, as we were riding, one of the dogs had gone on the other side of the driveway, and maybe chasing an animal or something, he had gone into the culvert on one side, and just as my son's horse was alongside that culvert on the other side, the dog came shooting out. And it just liked to scare that horse to death. And I didn't get a chance to grab my stopwatch, but I don't think that he made the 8 count that morning. But it didn't bother the horse that much. The next time we rode by that culvert, he remembered, it didn't bother him, but he watched that culvert like a hawk. In fact, as we got up to that, he just had his eyes glued to that culvert, and as we went past it, he bent his head around. I've never seen a horse go straight with his head bent around to his flank before, as he watched that culvert to see if that dog would come busting out again. They remember perfectly well, but they don't live in the past, and they don't live in the future. They live in the here and now. They're thinking about their companions, or about that patch of green grass under their nose, or about what might be in your pocket, or about how they could get you to scratch that itchy place on their withers or on their elbow or around the dock with their tail. They're living in the present, in the here and now. And I can't help but think that we can learn something from our horses. You see, the problem with living in the past is that God isn't there. And God can't meet us in the past because we're not there anymore. And God can't meet us in the future because we're not there yet. God can only meet us here, in the here and now. We can only experience God's presence. We can only experience God's love today, right now, right here, in this moment. You see, this day and this moment are God's gift to us too. And if we waste them, then we've tossed away that gift. The psalmist, of course, puts it this way: "This is the day which the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it." And I wonder, where are you living? A woman named Patty Hobson has written this. She says, "We convince ourselves that life will be better after we get married, have a baby, or then another. Then we are frustrated that the kids aren't old enough, and we'll be more content when they are. After that, we're frustrated that we have teenagers to deal with. We all certainly will be happy when they're out of that stage. We tell ourselves that our life will be complete when our spouse gets his or her act together, when we get a nicer car, are able to go on a nice vacation, or when we retire. The truth is, there's no better time to be happy than right now. If not now, when? Your life will always be filled with challenges. It's best to admit this to yourself and decide to be happy anyway. For a long time, it had seemed to me that life was about to begin, real life. But there was always some obstacle in the way, something to be gotten through first, some unfinished business, time still to be served, a debt to be paid, and then life would begin. And then at last it dawned on me that these obstacles were my life. This perspective," she writes, "has helped me to see that there is no way to happiness, that happiness is the way. And so treasure every moment that you have, and treasure it more because you shared it with someone special, special enough to spend your time with. And remember that time waits for no one. So stop waiting until you finish school, or until you go back to school, or until you lose 10 pounds, or until you gain 10 pounds, or until you have kids, or until your kids leave the house, or until you start work, or until you retire, or until you get married, or until you get divorced, or until Friday night, or until Sunday morning, or until you get a new car or home, or until your car or home is paid off, or until spring, or until summer, or until fall, or until winter, or until you're off welfare, until the 1st or the 15th, until your song comes on, until you've had a drink, until you've sobered up, until you die, until you are born again, to decide that there is no better time right now than to be happy. I wonder, where are you living? I met a man several months ago, and as we were talking, he was telling me about himself. He decided that he wanted to tell me and explain why he had some individuals that he had difficulty relating with, and he began to share some events that had taken place, in some cases over 20 years ago, that kind of explained some bitterness in his life. I remember thinking, well, what a shame that he's letting something that happened so far back in the past rob him of his joy today. Horses don't do that, of course. You know, we tossed that horse back in the field after we finished that ride that day when the dog had scared him half to death. And he didn't go running around and for the next several months say to all his herd mates, "Did you see what happened to me? That dog like this scared me to death." He dropped his head and started thinking again and ate the next tuft of grass in front of him, and he was just fine. Because he left the past behind and he was living in the present. But where are you living? I remember several years ago, I met with a young couple for pre-marriage counseling, and they get younger and younger, I think, every year. And I always like to ask, the couples how much they've begun to plan and dream together. And this couple had planned to the nth degree. I mean, they had it mapped out. This is what they were going to do in 1 year and 2 years and 3 years and 5 years and 10 years and 15 years. And it was just all, and we can't wait until we get to this point in time. I remember thinking, well, that's really nice, and I'm glad that you've talked, and I'm glad that you've dreamed together, but don't forget about the present. Don't forget about the here and now. Where are you living? We tossed that horse back out in the pasture, and he didn't spend the next several weeks either fretting about the next time we would take him out again and he'd have to walk past that culvert. He just dropped his head and started eating, and he enjoyed the present. You see, this day, this moment is God's gift to you as well. And God wants to bless you in it. Will you pray with me? Well, God, you know us better than we know ourselves. You know how inclined we are sometimes to live in the past, to look at everything that's changing around us and just think that it's all for the worst and that things were better, so much better years ago. And in the process, we miss your gift. We miss your presence. We miss your love now. And you know that sometimes we spend our time wasting away the present because we're dreaming about the future when things will be so much better. Help us to sense your presence with us right here, to know your love for us this moment, that you are here for us, that you are available, that this day is your gift to us as well. And bless us with it as we open ourselves to your love. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.